Hello and welcome back to Raze Gaming and another new Elden Ring build. This time we're focusing on the unassuming and often unused weapon type, the hammers here. No, not colossal weapons or the great hammers, just a small, regular, average hammer, in this case the Morning Star in Occult. If you aren't aware, these weapon types were actually buffed in multiple ways in the previous patch and current patch in some of the most effective important ways. Specifically called out to have a massive buff in the form of the attack speed and range buff, where it was really lacking in 1.08, as well as better recovery in general, which leads to much better combos and follow-up attacks in trade, which has a really effective pairing when we use the awesome raw Barbaric raw, which was buffed in the previous patch in 1.07, allowing for some deadly and impressive damage in PvP, trading really well thanks to the multiple poise buffs specifically too. This also leads to steamrolling bosses and enemies in PvE, where things are much more consistent and easy to punish, blasting up to the potential of 10,000 damage in a full heavy combo burst, thanks to the unique heavy combo we get from Barbaric Raw. This is the Raw, which will increase our AR, and then this is the new heavy combo that it gives us, a 3-hit combo, which you can follow up with another 2 hits at the end. That was buffed to have a longer buff duration, so I don't have to keep roaring and worrying about that, making it much easier to reliably use, and there's also better recovery to avoid incoming damage, or better, to combo more effectively. It's also the case that in 1.07, hammers based poise as a weapon type entirely was raised, and then again in 1.07 when we're two-handing specifically, which is the basis of this build. So the poise of damage has shot through the roof. It's now very impressive in PvP, where poise has become such an important aspect of builds and the playstyles. To say the least then, this weapon type, hammers, has been buffed and buffed and buffed back to back in multiple patches, and very important ways at that. But the question is, was this enough to make this completely underused and irrelevant weapon type actually good and worth using? Let's take a look, starting with PvP. So, PvP. This build comes down to your basic attacks, the range of those, which have obviously been improved this patch, the speed of your attacks, which has also been majorly improved this patch, and trading through the use of the much better poise that hammers has now, especially when we're using this build where we're using a hammer in two-hand. In fact, for the first time ever while recording this footage, I came across another player using a different two-hand small hammer build, where they're using sort of a club just to bonk combo you. So people are using them now and actually trying them, and that's awesome. The potential is there, because when I buff up, say, with the raw and then do the full heavy combo, which is a 3-hit combo, then it has this follow-up 2 hits, but even just the 3-hit combo when fully charged can do upwards of 1,200 damage, and because this is an occult bleed build, we can get a bleed proc during that, potentially to add another 300, 400 damage, and about 1,600 damage is enough to kill most any build in the game. Now, admittedly, landing a fully charged heavy attack is unlikely. You need to have really good understanding of PvP, knowing when someone's panicking, rolling around you, so you can get the full combo off, or luckily trade into someone who's timed, say, an Ash of War or an attack poorly. What's much easier is just tapping it for the fast, lighter, weaker version, which comes out quickly, is that 3-hit combo. The 3rd hit is a bit slower, which does catch people out as they run in after avoiding the first 2 hits, and then if you hit them with that, you can follow up with the other 2 hits, even if they're quick and not charged, to further burst someone down in a trade they're just not expecting to go that long. So it is viable, there is reasonable damage there, but per single hit, it's about 400 damage a hit. And because I have like 80 arcane and great bleed potential, it's going to take 3 hits or so to actually get a bleed proc in reasonable time. It is doable though, because of the better attack speed, and most importantly, the improvements to range, because these little weapons had serious issues with range before this patch. Now it's so much better. Like, with this weapon in particular, the Morning Star, it's running heavy, it's surprisingly sort of a thrust, which works incredible to start a trade, to roll punish, or catch someone who's running away. Having something like that is honestly key to making this work, because you can't always standing trade with people who run back after every attack, which is a very common tactic in PvP. We can also make use of our high arcane to run a simple incantation like Swarm of Flies, which is great in PvP because it's going to slowly move towards them. Because we have really high arcane, the proc will go off even after just 1 or 2 hits, bursting people at range, finishing them when they're low and they're looking to not fight, or using it for trade opportunities, so sending it in and then running in with it at the same time, maybe with that running heavy to poke them. While the poise damage is not perfect, it is significantly better. If I was wearing even heavier armor and just relying on the poise damage of the hammer, I could pretty much trade with most builds, even the colossal big heavy hitting ones, which is really cool and impressive for a small weapon like this. But when it comes to PvP, that's mostly it. We have our one ranged option, we have our trading tool with the heavy, and the running heavy attack to rely on otherwise. It's undeniable that the hammer feels much better in PvP now. In fact, it is more than certainly usable and viable at this point. But when it comes to PvP, I'm not convinced this reaches meta levels yet, due to the lower damage and still shorter range compared to other weapons. Take, say, the daggers or the fists or the claws that also were buffed in these similar ways this patch. Those are absolute powerhouses. Those are clear meta picks, even in PvP now, and with a variety of builds, which is fantastic. The hammer, despite the fact that it's in so many different buffs, still struggles and still takes a really good player to actually make it work. But it is doable now, which before it certainly wasn't. But on the other hand, we obviously have PvE, where this is a killer. When buffed up with that roar, we have the unique heavy combo, which is a 5-hit combo, right? You have the first 3 hits, then you follow it up with the following hit, the following heavy, which is another 2 hits, more slamming style. If you tap it and tap that for the second part as well, it comes out a lot faster. And despite the fact that it's not fully charged, it does great damage. The full 5-hit fast combo is between 5,000 and 7,000 damage, especially when the enemy can bleed, which is most of the time. If you're able to get the fully charged, fully heavy hitting combo off though, that's going to lead to 10,000 damage or more easily. And it's actually reliable to do because this is really heavy hitting attacks with high poise. So you can trade into a lot of attacks to do this, and you're going to stagger the enemies often because again it's heavy hits. If an enemy does stagger, you probably don't even want to go for the critical. It does so much damage, this fully charged combo, that you just go for it again immediately and get at least a 3-hit combo off for another burst of damage and probably another bleed proc. The downside here is the awkward shorter range of this weapon type, which is still not really an issue in PvE because you just press against the enemy, against the boss anyway. So I find that heavy combo just such a great, reliable punish option. But if for some reason the window is not short enough, or maybe you can't trade with them, which is unlikely, you always have the running heavy or jumping heavy options to punish those smaller windows of opportunity. Those both lead to staggers as well, leading to the full actual standing charge combo. So it's honestly a very simple loop and straightforward playstyle. Punish with a long heavy combo whenever you can, trade with it wherever possible, and then running heavy or jumping heavy in the shorter windows, and punish the criticals with the full heavy combo further. So I find the build much more straightforward and functional in PvE, where it's very easy to use, fun, and very effective. Also, this weapon's really easy to get early in a playthrough, and the ash itself comes from the north side of the lakes region, so getting this in a new playthrough, getting it up and running, is easy to do early on. Of course, getting your weapon to be, say, a cult, and then leveling your arcane higher, that takes more time, but that's the fun of working and progressing a build in a new playthrough. But we danced around the topic a bit now, let's get into the build and explain how we get this to work. So, the build then. Making the most out of a small hammer like this is difficult, but with those buffs it is obviously possible, as we've talked about. We're using the Morning Star because it actually has kind of that unique moveset where we have kind of more of a slammy, thrusty style when you're not buffed up using the raw. Obviously, I'll have mentioned the running attack, the running heavy, being a thrust. It's actually quite a good roll catch and trading tool, and also punish in PvE. Things change though when we use the Ash of War, and that's when we get that unique heavy, which is kind of the basis of the build. So empowering that Barbaric Raw is kind of what we're looking to do. Now we're running the Morning Star in a cult because we have the Bloodlust buildup. That gives it arcane scaling, and by running high arcane, we get a really high Bloodlust buildup. As always, if it's around 100 or higher, that's really good Bloodlust buildup, and we have 97 here. To make our Raw stronger though, we have of course the Highland Axe in our offhand. This is a unique effect where Raws are actually enhanced by this weapon. So just having equipped makes the Raw more powerful, even when I'm two-handing and it's just on my side there. Technically it's equipped, so I'm technically getting that passive effect, and that's why we have it. For our seal, we are running Arcane, so obviously the Dragon Communal seal as always as the Arcane Scaling seal. And because it is a bleed build, we have the White Mask, which is going to increase our attack power when a bleed proc occurs. As far as our armor goes, it's purely about what level of poise we can get with the endurance we have. I have 18 endurance, which I'll talk about, meaning I can't wear overly heavy armor. So the Raging Wolf, the Veteran's Gauntlets, and the Radahn's Greaves are the highest poise I found I can get with this endurance. Now obviously we're using a Raw, so Raw Medallion is very important in powering that. We're using a heavy attack as our main source of damage in both PvE and PvP, so the Axe Talisman's actually really good there, as well as multiple hits occurring, especially in PvE, where the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia is going to proc and greatly raise our AR. Lastly, the Lord of Blood's Exultation. Again, whenever a bleed proc goes off, we get attack power, so it's got perfect unison with the build. The thing is, when it comes to PvP, poise is absolutely key. Now, we do have the two-handed hammer buffs for poise attack, but making sure you get those attacks off is vital. So actually swapping out either the Axe Talisman or the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia is going to be the way to go. To either run the Bull Goat Talisman to straight raise your poise, which is what I do, or you could run something like the Great Jar's Arsenal to then run heavier armor to get poise through that, as well as other protection, which is a reasonable idea. Lastly, for the Wondrous Physic, we're using both the Spiked and Thorny Cracked Tears to boost our successive attack power and our charge attack power for maximum DPS. As always, you could drop one of those to run the Crimson Bubble Tier if you're doing free-for-all PvP or invasions. The incantations we're running though with 25 Faith is Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow to boost ourselves up and increase our AR as much as possible. With those buffs active and the Barbaric Roar active, our AR gets to a reasonable 850, which with bleed procs, when you consider that, is pretty good, as well as the fact the AR will go up as we land successive hits. Finally, the actual stats we're running at level 150 is 60 Vigor for survival in PvP, 18 Endurance because that's the maximum we can get. I have not leveled Strength or Dex at all, 25 Faith for our incantations, and 80 Arcane to maximize our damage and bleed potential. So those are the stats and the build for this setup. But there you have it. That is our hammer build for patch 1.08. The weapon type has come a long way from being completely unusable, but I still feel, at least in PvP, it could do with a little bit more oomph or power, maybe raising the scaling or AR of the weapon type in general. When we look at daggers, fists, and claws who've been buffed in similar ways, those are now meta picks, whereas hammers fall behind a little bit despite even getting more buffs than those. One more patch to address them in some way, maybe attack speed, maybe AR, will probably push them over the edge into meta relevant options. Still, it's fun to use something that's less popular and less used and seen, so I've had a good time using this weapon today. If you guys want to see more builds in the future, then drop a like on the video, and if you have a suggestion for a different weapon type or weapon or build in general, then let me know in the comments. For now, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.